The news in recent weeks on Brexit trade agreement has been quite interesting. It's been quite obvious from things like the New Zealand trade agreement that the UK government is pushing ahead and agreeing a whole host of free trade agreements where it cannot evidence any benefit to the UK as a result of those trade agreements. There's some very classic scenes from Parliament where the Labour shadow minister, I think Thornbury, wasn't it, was challenging the trade secretary on the benefits of the New Zealand agreement, and pretty much saying they were negligible. There were lots of benefits to New Zealand and none to the UK. And this was a story that was picked up by the New Zealand press as well. They themselves were reporting this exact theme. And that's odd. It's a very embarrassing scenario when the foreign press are reporting more critically on your own government and your own press in your favour. I mean, that's just awkward. So we have to ask ourselves, how come the UK has ended up in this sort of position? How come there's not more challenge? Why are agreements being agreed where there's no clear benefit? And this is actually not that uncommon, really, in negotiation world, unfortunately. It's an easy trap to fall into for those who are not experienced or professional negotiators, those who don't have the ability to confidently assert themselves. So let me break this down a little bit. Rewind slightly. So throughout all these agreements that result from Brexit, there are clear and obvious problems. That a trade and cooperation agreement with the EU was obviously flawed. The current spat on the Northern Ireland Protocol is obviously the argument made by the UK have holes large enough to drive a bus through, and they're being very easily countered by the EU. And then, of course, we've got the Australian and New Zealand agreement, where it is painfully obvious that essentially those agreements will fatally, perhaps, undermine UK farming, for example. Probably not the only industry, that's just the one that's catching news headlines at the moment. But it's very clear that UK farmers are definitely the losers from these trade agreements. And so people might be asking, well, why aren't the civil servants dealing with this? Why aren't they stopping this from happening? The ones in the International Trade Department. And unfortunately, the honest truth is that those civil servants in the International Trade Department are not professional negotiators. They've tried to skill themselves up to be able to conduct these, and they probably have quite a lot of subject matter expertise, but they're not in themselves actually professional and assertive negotiators. Because this is one of the common problems you might find as a negotiator, is that senior people will do two things. They may set unrealistic objectives or demands to come out of the negotiation, and they may also take a far too active role in the negotiations themselves. So this is very much the job of any negotiator to manage that, to curtail that, because in reality, that sort of behaviour is very dangerous to your negotiation. It can really undermine your ability to negotiate any kind of agreement. And this can be seen time and time again, not just in the trade agreement side of things, but in a whole host of a variety of scenarios where senior people have felt pressured and applied that pressure downward to those who are meant to negotiate the agreement. So let's talk about the unrealistic objectives side of things first. The job of senior people is to set out the parameters, set the envelope of what they want the negotiation to come back with. And this has to be a two-way conversation between the negotiation team and the people setting the objectives. And part of what the negotiation team should be doing is conducting a whole host of analysis on this is what we definitely must push for example, your red lines or breakpoints, as otherwise known. Or they may say, here are things we can stretch for, here are some ambitious targets we can aim for. and here's some do not go below sort of targets that we should aim for, do not exceed, for example. So you have to set out a bit of a plan, a bit of a strategy against all those objectives, and then you have to get the senior people to agree to them. And if the senior person said, no, I don't want that, I want you to push them well past, let's say the top objective, the top thing you think you can achieve, then as a negotiator, you have to challenge that. If it, just setting an impossible objective did not make them happen. You cannot go away and negotiate, something that just the other side will never agree to. It's just, that can't be your objective. You're doomed to fail before you even begin the negotiations, if that's the position you're in. And in many ways, that is the position that international trade civil servants are in. And they are doomed to fail before they can even begin the negotiation. This is due to the way the UK politics have screwed trade agreement into being a numerical target, not a qualitative target. No other nation does that. All other nations will have very much, industrial, sectoral objectives that they want to achieve. They will never set time deadlines for achieving those objectives in their trade agreement because they know that fatally undermines the negotiation team. But the UK has done that. And that's a political decision, not any kind of sensible or technical or practical decision. So really what should be happening, and what is obviously not happening, is that senior civil servants should be challenging the ministers to be more realistic in the trade objective that they want. And then, because the trouble is, when you're negotiating anything, you've got to have a belief that what you're negotiating is worth it, is achievable, is something that you believe in. Because even though you may be there to do, to follow orders, if you like, if you don't believe in it because you think the thing's just silly, it's very hard to carry that negotiation with conviction. It could be a subconscious thing, it could be language, it could be phrasing, it could be body language. It'll be something subtle that you will not project, that the other side may consciously or subconsciously pick up on. And when they do that, then they know that they can push back, or they can undermine your belief in your position, whatever, because if you lack that conviction. And so when you got the International Trade Department publishing their own data showing how bad the agreement is, they can't even massage it, then that really tells you there's a huge lack of conviction. They're doing it because they're told to do it, not because they believe in it. And that is probably coming through in the quality of the negotiation, and why these are happening so quickly, and why perhaps the other countries' negotiators almost can't believe their luck in terms of being able to secure what they want so easily. So that's the objectives side of things, of why things are going so badly. The second part is senior people getting too actively involved. And that again can be really seen in the fact that the previous Trade Secretary, Liz Truss, was very heavily involved in the Australia and Japan and all the other trade agreements. That should not be happening. The role of the senior people is not to get intimately involved in a negotiation. There are many reasons for that. One is they're not subject matter experts. They can't have a grasp of the details. If they can't have a grasp of the details, why come to the meeting? It's a waste of time. So they should not be doing that. What they should be doing is setting the envelope. So perhaps introducing the team and saying, here's the lead negotiator, they have my full support, and I hope things are successful, and then backing out. That is what a senior person should do. They should trust their lead negotiators to get on with the job. They should not play an active role. And there's a lesson we can learn from the European Union here, actually, because they know this. And you will see this in their negotiation approach, that their commissioners, for example, will set the scene, will introduce the lead negotiator, will set the parameters, and then duck out and let the specialists get on with it. They will not come back to that negotiation meeting until as close to the end of the negotiations as they can. Now, there's an element of judgment here. They will perhaps turn up earlier if there's something really difficult, really thorny that needs dealing with. So they will turn up with the weight of their office behind them, having been fully briefed by the negotiation team to unblock an issue. But otherwise, those EU commissioners will only turn up right at the end of the negotiation to seal the deal, as it were, to put the final touches on, put the polish on, to show their support for what their negotiation team has negotiated. And that's a deliberate tactic done by the European Union, because they know that when it comes to negotiations, there are two particular rules that apply. One is, the more senior the negotiations, the slower the progress. That's just the way it is. With the best will in the world, things just slow down the more senior you get. The second thing that they know is that the impact of escalation only works if you don't do it too often. So what I mean by that is that when you raise an issue to a senior person to come to the negotiation to resolve that issue, that is an escalation. And if you're doing it every 5 minutes, then it loses its impact. The other side, oh yeah, here they are again, sort of response. Where if you very rarely do it, right at the end, then that escalation has a maximum impact. Oh, look, they brought the big guns out, sort of response. Because when such individuals turn up to the negotiation, they need to be bringing their credibility, their authority with them. That is part of the success. It's a team effort, really. They don't succeed just because they're senior people and they're absolute superb negotiators. They succeed because their negotiation team has set the groundwork, put things in motion as much as possible, and then briefed them thoroughly before they turn up to the negotiation. So that teamwork that helps them turn up, bring authority, bring credibility, and then argue the case is what makes it work. And the UK approach has not been to do this. The UK approach is the ministers have wanted to jet everywhere, be actively involved, be seen to be involved. What it means is it completely undermines their ability to play the escalation role. They also are just not experts in trade details at all, so you can't really achieve a lot by having negotiation meetings at ministerial level. And I think this has been seen in the quality of the agreements that are being signed. They're very much political instruments, they're not practical. And that unfortunately is the UK strategy, and unfortunately betrays a fundamental understanding of how to carry out such big negotiations and how to work together as a team to make them succeed and to deliver the objectives that should be set. Unfortunately, the UK doesn't have clear objectives beyond that of have many trade agreements, and this is why you end up with those scenes in Parliament where the opposition politicians will point to all the holes and say, where are the benefits? Why would you sign this document? What's the point of this? And you can see that in the language, the defensive language. The ministers are now having to justify them. And when they can't justify them because there's no evidence to justify it, you'll find that the language goes very emotive. And this is a real clue in any negotiation. If someone's using emotive language to try and shore up their cases in negotiation, they're already on the back foot. So sort of language to look for is opportunity, as a current buzzword. All the ministers seem to be saying, these trade agreements present opportunities. Well, that's emotive language. That's not actually telling you anything useful. It's not actually giving you concrete data, concrete facts that can be scrutinized. And I think that itself is the biggest alarm bell you can see. When no minister can really explain what it is they've done and the benefits, then you know that that conviction is just not there. And these agreements are not going to stand the test of time. So I hope that was helpful, a bit more political discussion than most, but just my insight on current events.